Welcome to Auntie Rose Narrates, where the life stories unfold, full of emotions, memories, and lessons we all can feel. What happens when the person you've loved your whole life walks away, leaving you alone? Let me tell you this story. I never imagined that my son's wedding day, the day a mother waits for her whole life, would end with a bowl of hot gumbo dripping down my face. I remember the heat, the sting, the silence, and the way my son looked at me. Not with concern, not with love, but with fear of upsetting the woman who threw it. People say weddings bring families together, but sometimes they show you the truth you tried to ignore for years. I stood there in my simple blue dress, the one I picked because I didn't want to outshine anyone. I smiled through the noise of the reception, happy to see my boy starting a new life. I kept reminding myself to stay calm, to stay in the background, and to let his wife's family shine since that's what everyone seemed to expect. I never thought being quiet and humble would make me invisible or disposable. When the gumbo hit my face, the room froze. The bride's mother, Linda, stood there with an empty bowl, breathing hard like she had finally taught me some kind of lesson. Guests stared. Silverware dropped, but no one moved. And the only thing I could hear was the soft music playing in the background, as if nothing had happened. I looked at my son. My heart searched his face, begging for one sign that he still saw me as his mother. One sign that he cared, but instead, he stepped toward her and said, "Mom, please don't make a scene. Not today." That was the moment something inside me broke quietly. Not with anger, not with hatred. Just a soft, deep sadness like a door inside my heart closing on its own. I wiped my face with the corner of a napkin. The gumbo was still hot. It smelled like spices and betrayal. And that was the moment I realized this wasn't an accident. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was the result of years of small wounds I ignored because I wanted my son to be happy. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I simply walked away, one slow step at a time, wondering how a mother becomes a stranger in her own child's life. Later that night, when I was alone, when the makeup was washed off and the hurt had settled deep in my chest, I picked up my phone. I made one call. A call that changed my son's life and finally made him understand what it felt like to lose someone who loved him more than anyone else in the world. Before I tell you what led to that moment at the wedding, I need to tell you about my son, my only child, my heart walking around in the world. His name is Michael. From the moment he was born, he held my finger with his tiny hand, and it felt like a promise. A promise that we would walk through life together no matter what. I raised him alone after his father left when he was 4. It was just the two of us in a small house with creaky floors, chipped paint on the porch, and a kitchen filled with warm meals and even warmer conversations. I wasn't perfect, but I loved him with everything inside me. He grew up gentle, kind, the type of boy who helped old neighbors carry groceries and always kissed my cheek before bed. On cold nights, we sat by the window with blankets wrapped around our shoulders, watching the rain slide down the glass. "Mama," he used to say, "I'm going to take care of you when I grow up." I believed him. Children say many things, but when your child says something with his whole heart, you tuck it away like a treasure. As he grew older, life became busier. He had school, friends, sports. But even then, he always saved a little time for me. Sunday breakfasts, shared dinners, long quiet talks about his dreams. When he got into college, I cried for 3 days, not because I was sad, but because I was proud. He still called me every night back then. Every single night. But things changed slowly, quietly, like the way seasons shift without you noticing. It started with shorter calls, then missed calls, Then weeks without checking in unless I reached out first. At first, I blamed myself. Maybe he was tired. Maybe he was stressed. Maybe I was bothering him, but deep down I knew something was pulling him away. That something had a name. Emily. The first time he mentioned her, his voice softened in a way I had never heard before. I recognized that tone immediately. It was the sound of young love, gentle and hopeful. I wanted to be happy for him. I really did. When he brought her home for the first time, I opened the door with a nervous smile on a tray of oatmeal cookies. She walked in with perfect hair, perfect makeup, and a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. I told myself not to judge too quickly, to give her time, to let her feel comfortable. But even then, in the space of that first visit, I noticed how my son watched her face before speaking, how he checked her reaction before answering my simple questions, and I noticed something else too. Whenever I spoke, she looked bored, like my words were raindrops hitting a window there, but unimportant. Still, I said nothing. I didn't want to be that kind of mother-in-law who caused trouble or held her son too close. So I welcomed her. I cooked for her. I asked about her family, her dreams, her job. I tried to smile even when she corrected my pronunciation, or rolled her eyes when I didn't know a movie reference, or whispered something under her breath to my son. But what bothered me wasn't her lack of warmth. It was the way my son changed when she was around. He became quieter, more cautious with his words, eager to please her, eager not to disappoint her. And slowly, he became distant with me. One evening, a few months into their relationship, I invited them over for dinner. I spent the whole afternoon cooking Michael's favorite dish, chicken pot pie with buttery crust and fresh herbs from my garden. I wanted it to be a warm, cozy night, the kind he used to love. When they arrived, Emily stepped inside, sniffed the air, and said, "Smells old-fashioned." She didn't say it loudly, but it was enough. My son's face fell, and he said, "Mom, maybe next time you can make something she likes too." I smiled. I said, "Of course," but inside I felt a small crack form. After dinner, as they were leaving, Emily gave me a quick hug, the kind you give someone you're trying not to touch. Then she said, "Thank you, ma'am." With single quotes, my son had never called me that. And hearing it from her made me feel older than my age, like I was being pushed into the corner of my own family. Time passed. Their relationship deepened, and I saw my son less and less. Sometimes weeks passed without a call. When I called him, he sounded rushed, distracted. Once, he even whispered, "I'll call you later. Mom, she is upset." He hung up before I could ask why. I sat on my couch that night, staring at the TV without watching it, holding my phone like it could warm my hands. I felt something heavy in my chest, a quiet fear that I was losing him, but I kept telling myself, he loves her. He's building a new life. This is normal. This is what mothers do. They let go. But letting go shouldn't feel like being pushed away. The first real sign that Emily didn't want me around came the day they announced their engagement. They told me at a restaurant, not at home, not in a warm moment like we used to share. Emily placed her hand on the table, showing off the sparkling ring with a smile that looked more triumphant than joyful. My son said, "We're getting married at her parents' estate. It's going to be beautiful." I smiled and said I was happy for them. Inside, though, something tightened. When the meal ended, Emily looked at me and said, "We're thinking of keeping the wedding party small, very intimate, mostly her family." I blinked. "Oh, I see." She shrugged lightly. "Nothing personal. Just, space, as if my presence would take too much of it." My son didn't say a word. Not one word in my defense. And that was the moment I realized I was not just losing him, I was losing the place I had in his life, but still, I said nothing. For months leading up to the wedding, communication became colder. My son stopped telling me details. When I asked where I should sit, Emily said, "We'll let you know," with a tone that made me feel like I was an outsider. When I asked how I could help, she said, "Just don't stress about it." When I asked what I should wear, she said something simple, something that won't stand out. Every word was soft, but the meaning behind them was sharp. And through it all, my son kept quiet. Choosing the easier path, choosing not to upset her, I tried to remind myself they were young, and young people make mistakes. I told myself not to take things personally, but the truth was, every small moment chipped away at something inside me. By the time the wedding day arrived, I felt like a guest, not a mother. A stranger sitting in a seat someone else had picked for me. I had no idea it would get worse. Much worse. I had no idea that the woman who barely spoke to me would later throw a bowl of hot gumbo in my face, or that my son, my sweet, gentle boy, would stand beside her and let it happen. As the wedding day grew closer, the distance between my son and me felt like a slow, steady rain, quiet but soaking into everything. He still called me sometimes, but the warmth in his voice was fading. Our conversations became shorter, polite, almost scripted. He no longer shared small things, like the way his day went or what he had for lunch. He didn't ask how I was doing. It felt like he was checking off a box that said, "Call mom," rather than truly wanting to talk. Tried to tell myself he was busy, engaged, planning a wedding, building a new life. But every time the phone rang and it wasn't him, a hollow feeling whispered through my chest. There was a time when he used to call me first whenever something big happened. Now, I learned things through social media pictures of cake tasting, posts about engagement parties I wasn't invited to, little notes about family dinners with her family. Her family, oh, they were very present, and I was very absent. The first time I met Emily's mother, Linda, was at a small pre-wedding gathering her family hosted at their home. My son told me about it the night before, as if it were an afterthought. "Mom, if you want to come, it's tomorrow at 6, he said. "But it's mostly for her family, so you don't have to." You don't have to. Those 4 words wrapped around my heart like cold fingers. Still, I decided to go. I wanted to show my support, even if I felt like an outsider. When I arrived, the front door opened to a bright, spotless foyer filled with expensive decor and high laughter. People moved gracefully, glasses in hand, wearing smiles that looked polished instead of sincere. Emily's mother, Linda, approached me with a smooth smile and eyes that scanned me from head to toe. "So you must be Michael's mother?" she said. Not my name, just his mother, as if I had no identity outside of him. "Yes," I replied softly. "I'm glad to meet you." She nodded, but her smile tightened. "Well, make yourself comfortable. We have everything under control." It was clear she wanted me to blend into the background like a piece of furniture, visible but not needed. Throughout the evening, I caught small moments that stung. The way Linda placed her hand on my son's arm to lead him places, as if she were guiding a child. The way she spoke proudly of everything she had planned. The way Emily clung to her mother's side, laughing loudly, practically glowing in her approval. I watched from a distance, trying not to feel out of place. My son looked happy. That's what I held on to. Even if he didn't spend much time with me that evening. But the moment that stayed with me was when I walked toward him, hoping for a small conversation. Before I reached him, I heard Linda say, "You have to make sure she doesn't interfere on the wedding day. This is our moment." He didn't defend me. He just nodded. I stopped walking. I turned around, and I swallowed the lump in my throat. I stayed 30 more minutes before quietly slipping out. I knew no one would notice as the wedding day approached. I found myself spending long evenings in my little kitchen, staring at the small decorations I had bought for the occasion. A soft shawl, new shoes, a simple blue dress I'd chosen because Emily had said she wanted the colors at her wedding to be soft and muted. I tried to make peace with everything. I tried to understand their world, a world where money and appearances were more important than warmth and connection. But deep down, I felt something shifting. A quiet ache, like a warning. Something wasn't right. One afternoon, a week before the wedding, my son stopped by. He hadn't visited in months. When I opened the door, he gave me a quick hug, the kind you give when you're in a hurry. He walked inside and sat at the kitchen table, but he didn't look comfortable. I poured him some lemonade. He didn't touch it. "Mom," he began, clearing his throat. "We need to talk about the wedding." My heart dropped. "Of course," I said. He looked at his hands. "Emily wants the ceremony to run smoothly. And look, her mom will be handling things that day. So if she asks you to do something, please just go along with it." I frowned softly. Why would she need to ask me anything? He hesitated. "She said you might get in the way with photos or seating or, traditions. Traditions. As if I wasn't even part of the most important one, being the groom's mother. I kept my voice steady. "Michael, I won't cause any trouble. I just want to be there for you." He nodded quickly. I know, just please don't take it personally." I smiled a thin smile. "I'll do my best." He finally looked up at me then, and for a moment, I saw my little boy again. The one who used to run into my arms after school. The one who used to whisper secrets to me at bedtime. The one who promised he'd always love me, but the moment passed. He stood up. "I have to go. Emily needs me." Of course she did. As he left, I watched him walk down the driveway. He didn't look back. The door clicked softly behind him, and the silence felt heavier than ever. The night before the wedding, I sat on my bed, holding an old photo of my son when he was 6. He was wearing his superhero pajamas, his little teeth showing in a wide grin. I remembered that day clearly. He had told me, "Mom, I'll protect you forever." Some promises are made with innocence, not with intention. I placed the photo back in the drawer and whispered, "I hope tomorrow is a good day." I had no idea how wrong I was. When the wedding morning arrived, I woke early, nervous but hopeful. I wore my dress, simple and soft, with small pearl earrings my mother had given me long ago. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a woman trying her best, trying to fit into a space that clearly didn't want her. I arrived at the venue, a large estate with white pillars and wide green lawns. Guests moved around like colorful butterflies, taking pictures, laughing in small groups. I stood alone for a moment, taking it all in. Then I saw Linda. She approached me quickly, her smile sharp and practiced. "Oh, good," she said. "You're here. Listen, please stay near the back during the ceremony. We have certain seating arrangements, and we don't want any confusion." "The back?" I asked softly. "I thought the groom's mother sits in the front row." She blinked once, slowly. "Well, normally, but today is different. We need symmetry, and her family will be on the front, right? So, balance. Balance." As if my presence could tilt the world, I nodded. "All right." She smiled again, relieved that I didn't push back. Inside the hall, I saw my son standing with his groomsmen. His tie was slightly crooked. I wanted to walk up and fix it like I used to when he was a boy. But before I could take a step, Emily appeared beside him and straightened it herself. He didn't even notice I was watching. I found my seat. In the back, alone, guests filled the room. Music played softly. The ceremony unfolded with beauty and elegance. and no space for me. During the vows, my son's voice shook a little. I wondered if he was nervous, or if he saw me sitting quietly where no one would notice. But he never looked my way. At the reception, things grew worse. Much worse. I walked to the buffet table, hoping to blend into the crowd. I wasn't hungry, but I didn't want to stand alone. As I reached for a small plate, a sharp voice sounded behind me. "Don't touch that." I turned. It was Linda. "There are designated plates for family," she said quickly. "You can use those." She pointed toward a smaller, almost hidden stack of plates near the corner. Plates that looked more like extras than part of the setup. I swallowed. "All right." I moved to the corner stack. Guests pretended not to notice. But silence often speaks louder than words. Next came the gumbo. A large pot sat on the buffet table, steaming with rich spices. Several people commented how delicious it was. Linda stood behind the table, serving bowls to her guests. When I reached the front of the line, she raised an eyebrow. "You want gumbo?" she asked. "Yes, please," I said softly. She scooped a bowl, but instead of handing it to me gently, she shoved it forward. The bowl tipped, and hot gumbo spilled down my dress and across my face. The burn was immediate. But worse than the heat was the humiliation. Gasps filled the air. Someone dropped a fork. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." But the loudest thing was my son's silence. He stood there, saw everything, and still stepped toward her. "Mom," he said quietly, almost pleading, "please don't make a scene." A scene. As if I were the problem, as if I were the embarrassment, as if the woman who threw boiling food at me was the one who needed protecting. And that was the moment the rising conflict became something else. A breaking point. Not loud, not angry, just final. I wiped my face, nodded slowly, and walked away. But the story didn't end there. Because later that night, I made one phone call, a phone call that would change everything. When I reached the bathroom at the wedding venue, I closed the door softly behind me and leaned against the sink. The room was bright and elegant, with gold-framed mirrors and polished marble floors. But in that moment, it felt like the coldest place on earth. I looked at myself in the mirror. My blue dress was stained. The gumbo had left dark marks on the fabric, and the steam had reddened the skin on my cheek. A few strands of hair stuck to my face. My hands trembled, not from the burn, but from the shock. I kept hearing my son's words in my head. "Mom, please don't make a scene." Not, "Are you okay? Let me help you. What happened?" Or even a simple, "Mom, I'm here." Just those 6 words. 6 words that cut deeper than anything I'd felt in years. For a moment, I felt myself slipping into an old memory, one from when he was 8 years old. He came home crying because a bigger boy pushed him at school. I held his face in my hands and told him, "No one hurts my child." "You hear me? No one." I sat with him for hours, comforting him, telling him he was loved. But here I was, standing alone after being hurt and humiliated. And my child didn't even come to check on me. I took a slow breath and closed my eyes. The music from the reception floated faintly through the walls, soft, warm, joyful. A world I wasn't part of. Laughter echoed down the hallway. My son's laughter? He had returned to celebrating as if nothing had happened. I wiped my face gently with a paper towel. I didn't want to cry. Not on this day. Not for people who did not see my worth. I smoothed my dress the best I could, took another breath, and walked out. When I returned to the reception hall, no one noticed me slip back in. I stood near the back, watching the dancing, the clinking glasses, the bright lights bouncing off crystal decorations. Emily and her mother looked perfect, smiling wide, soaking in the admiration from guests. My son held Emily's hand. He kissed her forehead. He laughed with her family. He didn't look for me, not once. I stayed for another 20 minutes, standing like a quiet shadow at the edge of a celebration I had no place in. Then I quietly picked up my small purse and made my way to the exit. The night air hit me like a cool wave. I inhaled deeply, letting the breeze calm my burning skin and tired heart. The sky was dark, dotted with stars that felt far and lonely. I walked slowly to the parking lot, hearing my shoes crunch against the gravel. Every step felt heavy, but also strangely freeing, like I was walking out of something I should have left a long time ago. When I reached my car, I sat in the driver's seat without turning the engine on. I placed my hands on the wheel and stared ahead. A part of me wanted to scream. Another part wanted to cry. But mostly, I felt numb. I let my head lean back and close my eyes. That's when my phone buzzed. I hoped foolishly, tenderly, that it was my son. Maybe he realized I was gone. Maybe he wondered where I was. Maybe he felt something, but when I looked at the screen, it was a message from Emily. Thank you for not causing trouble today. It really meant a lot. A message, not even from my son, and the words weren't gratitude. They were victory. A pat on the head for behaving. My fingers tightened around the phone. A slow ache filled my chest, an ache of years of quiet sacrifices, gentle love, and loneliness disguised as patience. That was when the truth settled in. I had lost him long before the wedding. Not because of love, not because of marriage, but because he stopped valuing the person who raised him, who protected him, who loved him more than her family ever would. I didn't reply to the message. Instead, I drove home. Not slowly, not quickly, just with the kind of quiet heaviness that filled the whole car. When I stepped inside my house, the silence wrapped around me like a blanket, too heavy, too still. I went to my bedroom, changed out of my stained dress, and placed it gently in a bag. Maybe I would try to save it. Maybe I wouldn't. I walked to the kitchen and made myself tea. The steam rose softly from the cup, warm and familiar. It reminded me of all the nights I'd waited for my son to come home from football practice, or for him to finish studying, or for him to walk in with news he couldn't wait to share. Those nights were long gone. I carried my tea to the living room, sat on the couch, and let the warmth soothe my hands. The house was dim, lit only by the small lamp beside me. I stared at the window, watching the wind move the branches outside. And then, in the quiet, I felt something shift inside me. A realization, a still, powerful clarity. I had allowed people to treat me like I didn't matter. I had allowed disrespect to grow so slowly that I didn't see how deep the roots went. I had allowed my son to slip away because I didn't want to burden him, and now, they believed I would always stay silent. I set my tea down gently, then I reached for my phone. My hands didn't shake. My breath didn't quicken. I felt calm, steady. Sure, because the call I was about to make wasn't revenge. It wasn't anger. It wasn't punishment. It was a boundary. The first one I had set in years. I opened my contacts and scrolled all the way down past family, past coworkers, past acquaintances until I reached the name of the person I knew would understand exactly what needed to be done. It was someone who loved me deeply, someone who had always been kind to me, someone my son respected once and feared disappointing. I pressed the name. The phone rang twice. Then a warm voice answered, "Hello? Are you all right?" I inhaled softly. "I'm okay," I said, "but I need to tell you something important, something that happened at the wedding." I explained everything, quietly, calmly, every detail. There was silence on the other end for a moment. Then the voice said, steady and firm, "That's all I needed to hear. I'll take care of it." One phone call, that was all it took. From that moment on, nothing in my son's life would ever be the same, and neither would I. The morning after the wedding, I woke to a quiet house, the kind of quiet that feels almost too still, like the world is holding its breath. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, soft and gentle. I sat up slowly, the memory of last night settling over me like a heavy blanket. My cheek was still tender from the burn. I touched it lightly and winced, not just from the pain, but from the reminder of how easily someone had decided to hurt me, and how easily my own son had allowed it. But then my eyes landed on my phone on the bedside table, and I remembered the call, the one call I had made Dot in that moment. I didn't regret it. Not for a second. I stood up, washed my face, tied my hair back, and made myself a cup of tea. The warm steam rose again, calm and familiar. I held the mug with both hands, letting the warmth settle into my fingers. Dot, just as I took my first sip, my phone buzzed. I thought it might be a message from anyone, really. But when I looked down, I saw my son's name. I stared at it for a long moment. He never called this early. Dot. My heart tightened, but I made myself breathe. I answered the call. His voice was tight, strained. Mom, what happened yesterday? I closed my eyes. You saw what happened, Michael? No, I mean... His voice cracked slightly. Why did you call Grandpa? Grandpa. My father. The man my son once admired more than anyone. The man who taught him how to fish, how to ride a bike, how to talk to elders with respect. The man whose approval my son always sought, even now. My father was old, yes, but sharp. Kind, but wise. And he had no patience for disrespect, especially toward family. I called him because I needed someone who would listen. I said softly, someone who wouldn't dismiss me. He exhaled deeply. Mom, he came to the house this morning. I know. He was furious, my son continued. He told me I had shamed our family, that I allowed my wife's mother to hurt my own mother. He said I disrespected you in front of everyone. I didn't respond. I let him speak. He told me I needed to fix this, he said, his voice shaking. He told me I wasn't raised to behave this way. I could hear the hurt in his voice, the confusion, the guilt. Part of me felt a small ache for him, but another part, the quieter, stronger part, felt this was necessary. Mom, he whispered, why didn't you tell me you were hurt? Why didn't you say anything? I breathed in slowly. Because you didn't ask, Michael. There was silence on the other end. Long, heavy silence. I continued gently. When the gumbo hit me, when the room went quiet, when your wife's mother looked me in the eyes after doing it, you didn't come to me. You didn't check on me. You told me not to make a scene. You didn't see me. His breath hitched slightly. I didn't know what to do. Emily was upset. Everyone was watching. I just wanted the day to go smoothly. I nodded even though he couldn't see it. I understand. But a wedding day is not an excuse to forget your mother. I didn't forget you, he said quickly. Didn't you? I asked softly. Really? Silence again. For the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't pleading for his attention. I wasn't begging for kindness. I was simply telling the truth. Mom, he said after a while, voice breaking. Grandpa said he's disappointed in me. He's disappointed in your choices, I corrected gently. Not in you. Can I come over? He asked quietly. I hesitated, not out of anger, but out of tenderness. I needed him to come for the right reason. Not because someone scolded him, not because he feared consequences, but because he truly wanted to understand. Yes, I said finally. Come. He arrived 20 minutes later. When he walked through the door, he looked smaller somehow. Not in size, but in spirit. His shoulders were slumped, his eyes red, his expression heavy. For a moment, he just stood there, unsure. I offered a small, gentle smile. He stepped forward and hugged me. A tight, trembling hug, the kind I hadn't felt in years. "I'm so sorry, Mom," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." I didn't say it's okay, because it wasn't, but I rested my hand on his back, offering comfort anyway. When he pulled away, he looked at my cheek. "Does it still hurt?" "A little," I admitted. He swallowed hard. I should have stopped her. I should have been there. He sat down at the table, and I made him tea, just like I used to when he was young. He watched me, eyes soft but filled with guilt. "Mom, why didn't you tell me sooner? About how she treated you? About how her family treated you?" I set the tea in front of him and sat down. "Because I didn't want to make you choose," I said simply. "I didn't want to come between you and the woman you love. But he stopped, pressed his lips together. I nodded. Yes. She was unkind, her mother too, but I hoped that maybe things would change. They won't, he said quietly. Not unless I do something. I met his eyes. What do you want to do? He looked down at his hands. I talked to Emily this morning. I told her what happened wasn't okay. I told her we needed space. She didn't take it well. I nodded slowly. He continued, voice quieter now. She said I was choosing you over her. I told her I wasn't choosing anyone. I was choosing what was right. My heart softened, but I stayed calm. She said if I walked out, she'd stay at her parents' house. She said her family doesn't want us around until things settle. I sighed softly. I'm sorry you're going through this. He shook his head. Mom, I should be the one apologizing. I let all of this happen. I reached across the table and placed my hand over his. You're learning. Sometimes learning hurts. A tear slipped down his cheek. He wiped it away quickly, embarrassed. I don't want to lose you, he whispered. You won't, I said gently. But you do need to think about the kind of life you want, and the kind of marriage you want. Respect has to come from both sides, and boundaries. They matter. He nodded slowly. You're right. We sat quietly for a few moments, not tense, not sad, just together. For the first time in a long while, I said softly, I'm speaking up for myself. And for you, this family, it can't grow in silence. He looked up. I love you, Mom. I smiled. I love you too. Later that evening, he left my house with a clearer mind. He said he needed time to think, to reflect, to make decisions not influenced by pressure or appearances. Days passed. Then a week, and then another. He called me every day. Longer conversations, warmer ones. Rebuilding something we had lost slowly, carefully. One afternoon, he came over again. He sat down on the couch beside me, hands clasped together. Mom, he said quietly, I've decided something. I waited up, he took a breath. I'm moving out of her parents' place. I'm getting my own apartment. And if she wants our marriage to work, she'll have to meet me halfway. She'll have to respect my boundaries, my values, and my family. My heart didn't jump or race. It simply rested. Are you sure? I asked. Yes, he said firmly. For the first time, I'm thinking clearly, and I want you in my life, not in the background, not as someone who has to walk on eggshells. I nodded slowly, proudly, quietly. Whatever happens next, he continued. I want you to know I'm choosing to be better, for myself, for you, for our future. Tears warmed my eyes, but they didn't fall. I only whispered, thank you. In the weeks that followed, something changed in my son. He grew into himself. He began standing up not with anger, but with quiet strength. He spoke calmly when others tried to manipulate him. He questioned things he had blindly accepted before. Emily reached out eventually, apologized, cried. Her mother never apologized. That didn't surprise me. But the most important change was in my son's heart. He saw me again. Not as an obligation, not as a shadow at the back of a wedding hall, but as his mother, the woman who raised him, the woman who loved him more than her own comfort, more than her own pride, Dot, and for the first time in a long time, he loved me back with the same tenderness he used to. The one phone call I made didn't destroy anything. It rebuilt something that had been broken for years. Not through anger, not through revenge, but through truth, and the courage to finally speak it. Something inside me shifted after the Gumbo incident, but it took a few weeks for that shift to turn into action. At first, I tried to convince myself that I could still mend things. I thought maybe if I stepped even further back, maybe if I kept my distance and only spoke when spoken to, things might find their place again. I told myself that my son was just overwhelmed. I told myself that maybe the wedding chaos had gotten to everyone's nerves. I tried to believe in excuses I didn't even believe in, but truth has a way of knocking on your door. Even when you don't want to answer it, the truth knocked for me the night my son called and said, "Mom, we need to set some boundaries." He said it gently, like he was trying to ease me into something painful, but the words still hit with the softness of a hammer. I think, he continued, it's best if you let us reach out first, especially for the first few months. We need space as a couple. I sat on my couch, staring at the blank television screen. The silence in my house became so loud that I could hear my own heartbeat. Of course, I whispered. I didn't argue. I didn't ask why. I just said, okay, Dot, because when you love someone, you bend. But there comes a time when bending becomes breaking. A week later, I learned something I wasn't meant to know. I learned it in the most unexpected way at the grocery store. I was picking out tomatoes when I heard two women whispering near the onions. They were talking about a wedding they had attended. The wedding of that young blonde girl whose mother caused a scene with the groom's mom. My ears opened like they had been waiting for those words all along. She did it on purpose, one woman said. Everyone knows Linda never wanted the groom's mother there. And the groom, he just stood there, didn't defend her at all. Can you believe that? The women laughed quietly, shaking their heads. I placed the tomatoes down. My hands were trembling. I felt small, smaller than I had felt in a long time. I walked out of the store without buying anything. The world felt heavier. The sky seemed lower. Everything felt like it was pressing down on me. Dot, that evening, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea I didn't drink. I stared at the steam rising, thinking of all the times I had protected my son, all the times I had held him when he was frightened, all the nights I stayed awake when he had a fever, all the mornings I worked double shifts so he could have the things I never had, and somehow, on the biggest day of his life, he chose silence over me. Dot, that was the moment I felt something inside me settle. Not anger, not revenge, just acceptance. Acceptance that I matter too. Acceptance that silence can be its own kind of goodbye. Acceptance that walking away doesn't mean you stop loving someone. It just means you start loving yourself too. That was the night I made that phone call. The call he would never forget. Dot, it wasn't dramatic. It wasn't harsh. My voice didn't shake. Dot, I simply called my son's workplace, a company I had helped him get into because I knew the hiring manager for over 20 years. I had never used that connection for myself, but I had used it for him. When the manager answered, I said softly, I think it's time you stop giving my son the special privileges you've been giving him because of me. A long silence followed. Then I added, he has his own family now, and they believe he doesn't need me. So please, let him stand on his own feet. I wasn't hurting him. I was releasing him. Releasing both of us. The next morning, my son called 12 times. I didn't answer, not because I was punishing him, but because, for the first time in my life, I needed peace more than I needed to fix everything, and that silence, that gentle, quiet silence, became the turning point of my life.